Hours, a weekly live show brought to you by the team at Bunker Labs, a national network of veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs dedicated to helping our community start and grow their own businesses. I'm your host, the one and only Iron Mike Steadman, coming to you from Newark, New Jersey, joined by my co-host Amy Morrison and our special guest today, Rosie Lee. What's going on, y'all?
Howdy.
Hey.
I apologize if there's a little bit of an echo today. Usually I try to podcast from my studio, but I'm working from home today. I got my two screens going. Y'all know how it is sometimes, but I'm really excited to chop it up with you, Rosie, about the importance of thinking through your business model. A lot of what you do with Action Zone, we serve a lot of the same early stage entrepreneurs. This is something people don't really tend to think about, right? So design thinking and all that stuff is great, but when you're actually out bootstrapping a small business, it's a little bit different, and we're going to get into that today. But before we do, I'm going to pass it over to Amy to talk about any updates that are in the bunker.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Okay, so this week we've got, it's Women's History Month. Yay. So we have a new blog post up on the blog celebrating Women's History Month. So you can check out the inspiring stories of female veterans and military spouses who have started their own business and discover the challenges they've faced and overcome. So that is on the Bunker blog. And then we also have a new Veterans Entrepreneur Spotlight blog post on Monifa Keynes, who has her own line of hair accessories. And y'all got to read the story because some kidney failure, transplant, a whole thing. So check that out on the blog. I will post the links in a sec. And big news. I think we talked about this briefly last week, but then we had to postpone applications. So veterans and residents applications are officially open now. So the next cohort starts in July, and then you can apply now, or you can wait until next week after we have our FAQs. Xavier Clark is going to come on next week and talk about the program in depth and answer any of the questions that you have. But till then, you can check out bunkerlabs.org/veterans-in-residents or /VIR to get more info on the program now. And then, tune in next week for Q&A. And that's it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Amy, for passing that info around. A couple of things I want to say. Number one, make sure you check out the Bunker Labs blog we put out about events and pitch competitions taking place in 2023. I know for a fact a lot of y'all are looking for non-dilutive capital. That's a great resource. So make sure you check that out. Number two, and like Amy said, in celebration of Women's History Month, we put together a monster blog with some interviews from the Transition Podcast. Make sure you check that out. So, appreciate you bringing that up, Amy. Now, without further ado, we have Rosie Lee. Rosie, I got to meet Rosie for the first time, and I think it was a Bunker Labs fly-in in Nashville, probably about 2 years ago. It's crazy to think how quick time is kind of flying by, but real excited to talk to you today about business models. It's a challenge, right? So first, please take a moment to introduce yourself and why this topic of business models is so important to you.
Well, I'm a serial entrepreneur, shameless serial entrepreneur, currently working at Bunker as the manager for veterans and residents, previously working with the ambassador program. Love doing both. Also, as you mentioned, have my own nonprofit in Tampa called Action Zone, where we work with early stage ideation type veterans and military spouses, getting them to launch or grow their business, whether they started and didn't really do this business model thing we're going to talk about today and aren't really growing as much as they want. And that's really why it's been so important to me, why this is so important to me. And I'll tell you, did you ever do one of these, Mike?
Is that a crossword puzzle?
No, well, it's not a crossword puzzle. That's what you use a pen and paper.
Sorry, a puzzle.
Jigsaw puzzle. You ever do one of these?
I have.
Yep. You ever do one of these?
I have.
Now tell me, when you got them, did you just open the box and throw all the pieces on the table and then throw the box across the room and never look at what it was supposed to look like? And then actually get it all done?
Yeah, no, I probably had a reference, right? You got the picture there, probably reading the instructions.
Absolutely.
Right? You're organizing.
And if you do it all right, you don't have any extra parts or any missing parts at the end, right? So that's kind of the whole concept behind this. But really to drive this point home a little bit further, and why a business model is so important is you go online. How many times have you heard this? You go online, you order your business cards, you set up a web page, a landing page or a website, you slap some CEO on or SEO on it, and then you go get your shiny new LLC because you heard that you can't get into heaven if you have never had an LLC, right? So you get that, and you think that because of all of that you're in business. But you're not in business. You don't even have a business, because all of those things that everybody rushes out to do doesn't validate your business. And it leaves you in a position where 3 months later, 6 months, if you're lucky, you're looking at your checkbook going, I'm still paying this website and I'm still paying for this SEO and I'm not making any money yet. I don't know where to find my customers. I don't know how to make my product get from where it's at to where it needs to be. And so to solve that problem, to go back to the business model canvas, if you didn't do one before, this will help you drive that business in a way that makes sense and, more importantly, makes money.
So, Rosie, all right, I'm gonna ask you, I'm gonna challenge you on this, and tell me if I'm wrong, right? I came in through the entrepreneurial ecosystem by way of Stanford Ignite. So that was the first time I got formally trained to be an entrepreneur. And they were pushing this business model canvas on me, right? Same thing when I did some accelerator programs here locally, business model canvas, right? But what I have found for a small business, like freaking pulling out like, I don't know, a Google Doc, writing a list of products and services that you want to offer, setting some price points and going after it. Now, what I will say is being a more informed entrepreneur, having experience trying to take a product or service to market, the business model canvas makes a lot more sense to me and I can get more value out of it. But early on, I was getting overwhelmed on like the design thinking and all this stuff. And I really just need to go out and like sell some podcasts. You know what I mean?
You are, Mike, you're absolutely right. The first thing that I tell people, even at the beginning of teaching them about the business model canvas, is bake a brownie and go out there and sell it. If you want to open a bakery, you don't go buy the building and the ovens and all the other accoutrements of a bakery. You bake a brownie and you go out and sell it, because that's the only way that you know whether or not the product or service you have is sellable. The challenge is when you write that list of things that the things you need, the products and services you want to sell, and the market that you think in your head is the one that is going to be purchasing your products or services. Sometimes your hypothesis is way off the mark and you are selling your solution to people who don't have that problem, or you haven't properly phrased the solution so that they identify with that problem that your solution solves. That's the challenge with, I'm going to say, they say 62% of all statistics are made up on the spot, right? So I'm going to say 75% of all new entrepreneurs go out there to sell their solution without one iota of information about whether or not somebody actually needs that. They think they do, and then they go out and spend a lot of time and money developing this, only to get stuck. Generally, if they get lucky and they start selling some stuff, generally that happens between 6 and 9 months. They've gone through all of their family and friends to sell their stuff and the referrals that those people gave them, and now they're like, I don't know where to find customers. I don't know how to reach my customers. I don't even know who my customer is. Above anybody else, like the rest of us, being an entrepreneur is hard. There are days that are just wonderful, and there's days when you just keep shooting yourself in the foot. The reason I advocate for the business model is those days that get really hard are the days that, looking back at how you plan things, the things you validated, the people you talked to find out if you're going to find them on Facebook or Instagram, or if you need to advertise on a bus bench, that from what you did to validate that model. Can you do business without it? Absolutely. I did for years. Some of the businesses that I have had, I could have been so much more successful if I had actually taken these steps and identified some things about my business, then it wouldn't have fizzled out. Other businesses I was able to get, like many of us can. I didn't need a business model. I was successful. I was a mobile DJ for 15 years. I didn't have a business model canvas at all. But when times get tough, and they always do, as a small business owner, having a plan in place so that you can kind of look at where maybe you took a left turn, or maybe where some of your thoughts about the way things should work aren't working that way, then you can pivot more easily. You can iterate your idea and your concept and your products more easily when you have this mapped out for you.
I'm going to comment. Dutch DeVries just says startups need someone that understands product strategy as well as someone who understands business strategy, as they often aren't the same person. And I know sometimes what can be confusing for a lot of people is we always focus on startups, right? But I appreciate your question. But even if you're like a mobile DJ, like you said, you cut hair or whatever, there are these things that we do that we're really passionate about, like me launching podcasts. So I'm part of a group called No BS Agencies, have a business coach named Pia Silva. And I noticed that there's a lot of creatives that are really good at the branding, but they don't know anything about business, right? Like, how can we introduce new lines of revenue for ourselves? You know, how can we decrease our overhead and increase our profitability by introducing intensives and VIP days and all these different things, right? So Dutch is spot on about like, look, it's great. We're super passionate about this product that we're taking to market.
Yep.
Even if you're selling a trinket, right? You're going to little mobile pop-ups or whatever, and you're selling something. But like, how does this all work together? Like, how does the company make money, not just that one individual product?
And that's really, and I agree with Dutch, product strategy is so important. And many of the entrepreneurs start out with a passion for their product, right? Product or service. It solves a problem in their life, or they recognize it solves a problem in someone else's. And so that passion is ignited and off they go developing the product or the service. And they spend an inordinate amount of time just developing the product, not even thinking about that other side is once they finally have that done, now where are they going with it? You know, where are they going with it? Who needs that product? And when you get at that 3 or 6 months, when you've gotten done selling to all of your friends and family, then where are you going for customers you don't know? And who do you need to distribute that product or service? You know, part of the problem with micro businesses and home-based businesses, or Main Street businesses, is that they're on this local or regional level, and they want to get past that, but they haven't given any thought to how their product or service can be distributed on a broader base, across the state, across the country, internationally. I tell this story in the classes that I teach all the time. I'm sure you've had Birdseye frozen foods, right?
Of course.
Do you know who Clarence Birdseye is?
Do
you know anything about? Well, let me tell you about Clarence Birdseye, because he's my favorite.
From the book? What's the book? Who's the Ice House book?
No, it's not. But we're going to talk about the Ice House book. Clarence Birdseye, of course, makes frozen foods, or he did. He learned how to do that because he was sent off by what is now called the Army Corps of Engineers to go study the Intuits. He was kind of a flake. He was a scientist. He loved bugs, but he wasn't a good employee. Most entrepreneurs are not, right? So he's out there. The Intuits are showing him how to ice fish. And, you know, in the summertime, it might get to 20 below zero where he was at. And so they taught him to hang it from a cord after he caught it. And it was so freaking cold that it froze it instantly. Well, that was really cool and all. But what was the real magic was when he thawed it out to cook it, that it tasted like he just caught the fish. And he started thinking about his scientific brain and realized that freezing it that fast didn't create cellular changes like it did the way everybody froze food back then. You know, you dug a hole in the ground, and as it got wintertime, it would freeze it slowly but surely. You take it out to thaw before the spring harvest, and you got mushy food. You got mushy vegetables, mushy meat, mushy fish. So he came back to the United States, Massachusetts area, Virginia, and he created plates to flash freeze this food. And he started filling up his warehouse with frozen food. And these local people would buy some every day, whatever they could cook that day. He couldn't ship it anywhere because there were no frozen rail cars. There were no frozen vans. Not even his local community did anybody own a freezer. So he had this revolution to freeze food, but he couldn't get it to his customers because they had no way to store it. That's the glory of having a business model. You can look beyond what's happening today and see what you're going to need tomorrow to continue to grow without forgetting that, oh, I've almost went to debtor's prison because I have so much frozen food that nobody can buy.
So let me ask you this, Rosie, right? How do early stage entrepreneurs that are just treading water carve out time to actually work and think through their business models?
That's a tough question about carving out time. It is really a personal decision. It is really how dedicated are you to building it right or to starting generating revenue? Because I totally believe in bootstrapping. I don't believe in diluting your business off the bat. I don't think you should take out loans. You bootstrap your way to success. So individually, you have to decide how much do I need to know and how much time am I willing to give up for something else in order to do that. And every entrepreneur has to make that decision, and we all have.
I guess what I'm trying to hint at for y'all as you tuning in, it's real easy to get caught up in the day-to-day hustle and bustle, right? People are like, I'm just making it, right? You're putting out fires, you're doing all this other stuff. But what Rosie's talking about with these business models and really trying to think through like new lines of revenue, new channel partners and stuff, et cetera, that's really that high level. That's that 30,000 foot view. And you've got to make sure you're carving out time to think there. Because guess what? Like, you start bringing on vendors and employees and whatnot, they're not thinking business model, right? They're thinking, how do I earn income for myself? How do I increase my, revenue? How do I increase my take home? Versus you, like, I think about COVID, Rosie, right? If you weren't looking at your business model during COVID, you probably went out of business. Because when everything shut down, people had to think, okay, how are we going to earn income?
That's
I was
right.
teaching on-site boxing classes. I had to pivot to virtual, right? Which means I had to implement new systems, right?
Yep.
Software and stuff, etc. So just make sure you're thinking ahead. Bob Abbott goes, I'm a creative and I've just started scheduling 1 hour per week to discuss money. This is a synchron hour that I spend just looking at money, not new product design, and it helps a lot. And so basically, I think he's thinking about like, where is money coming in? And also maybe how he can increase profitability. Maybe some customers aren't as profitable as you would like.
Yep.
etc. So kudos to you for carving out that time, Bob.
Well, and what you just said before is really important, and it just drills back to that reason why it's important to have a business model. When you finally launch, once you've sold enough that you actually are launching the business, not just making enough to test your product and the fit with the market that you're working with. The second stage of an early startup is all of that operational stuff that happens that you don't even know what's coming down the pike at you. Just when you thought, oh, I've launched my business, I'm making some money. And then this new train comes pulling into the station. And it's all of those operational challenges, like you were just mentioning, that you don't even think about. You don't even know what you don't know unless you've done this a million times, or at least a couple dozen. And so having a solid foundation and some strategic plan for moving forward based on what research and validation you've done on that model gives you better ability to withstand and survive actually some of those challenges like hiring and bookkeeping and more product development for new revenue streams. Distribution channels and communication channels. And oh my gosh, now I've got to create a community on Facebook and Instagram for my customers so that they'll continue to buy. All of this stuff comes at you after you've launched. So you want to make sure that everything is running the way it's supposed to efficiently so that you then can divert your attention to those new challenges that are going to come up.
Yeah. And the old way people used to do businesses, they would write a whole long business plan, right? Maybe they would go take it to the bank to try to get a loan or whatever, but they did it in absence of actually validating. And what we're talking about now with like the business model canvas, the lean startup movement is get something out in the market you can test and then start to understand, right? What's it? Build, measure, learn, figure out what's working, learn, start to iterate, right? So again, because for the community, we know, let's be honest, most of y'all are making it up. You're white knuckling it. Right? You're still trying to figure it out. But man, there are frameworks out there that can help guide you along that way. And the business model canvas is one great way. But there's some other ones out there too that we can talk about maybe in another episode. So
I like to I like to describe the difference between a business model and a business plan is that a business model gets you from idea to launch, and a business plan gets you from launch to succession planning. Then you have all that valid information to build that plan off of. You've got some historical data from your business when you need it, whether that's because you want to get a loan or you want to get an investor or all of those other things. But the business model gets you to launch and the business plan gets you to your exit.
So now, Rose, we're going to transition to book recommendations. What book rec do you have for our audience today?
Who Owns the Ice House by Clifton Taubert and Gary Schoniger. And let me tell you, this is a great book for all entrepreneurs, honestly, but I think it especially is important for veterans and military spouses. And I'll tell you why. Because this book is about entrepreneurial traits. It's a story about a gentleman that should never have been a business owner in his time. And if you've not read the book, you'll understand why I say that. But those 8 pieces of information, those 8 traits that are common to successful entrepreneurs is really applicable to veterans and military spouses because it enables you to see the transition from your military skills and mindset to an entrepreneurial skill and mindset and how actually parallel they are. That is why veterans and military spouses make such excellent business owners, because they have had to mitigate the risk and they have had to have a complete the mission at all cost kind of attitude. They've learned to collaborate and work as a team, which is so important in business, whether that means that the competitor with you down the street is selling a similar product as you and you find a way that you can both work together. That's what this book helps you see, to transition from that military mindset to an entrepreneurial mindset. Although I advocate it for all entrepreneurs.
Rosie, did you know that the story in that book, his uncle, whatever, there's also a movie called Once Upon a Time We Were Colored, right?
I didn't know they made a movie out of it.
Yeah, you should check it out. So there's a movie, and he's a character in it. He's not the main character, but you should check it out. But that book is being passed around the Kauffman Foundation, which is like one of the leading entrepreneurial think tanks in the country. So I highly recommend it. I got it on Audible. Haven't finished it yet, but I will. So thank you for plugging that.
Gary Schoniger, the author, is in Cleveland, Ohio at the ELI Mindset Entrepreneurial Learning Institute in Cleveland. He's the co-author with Clifton on this. He does entrepreneurial mindset classes all over the world. And this book and meeting Clifton Taubert launched this off. He's awesome.
And speaking of mindset, my book recommendation is How Champions Think in Sports and Life by Dr. Bob Rotella. Been reading a lot about sports psychology from some of the work I'm doing with the Lions Pride and some other organizations that I'm working with. And it's so important for us as entrepreneurs. And, sports is also a representation of life. And one of the things I like about this book is you think about it, right? How many of us are going through cash crunches or challenges right now with the whole economy and, just stuff is changing, right? When you're an entrepreneur, you really feel that shift as opposed to when you're working a job, right? Yeah. But how would an athlete think, right? He's confident. Hey, I'm gonna hit the jump shot. I don't care if I miss 50 shots in a row, right? I'm just getting warmed up, right? Little mental things that elite level athletes have to think about themselves, right? And that confidence is actually a choice. People choose to be confident. See, a lot of times people think like, oh, I have the validation to back it up, therefore I am confident, as opposed to I'm confident right now because I know I'm going to figure this out. Because one of the things he talks about in the book, if you are not confident, it will definitely hinder your performance. And I'm not talking about like ego, right? Just like, oh, I'm super confident in this market like crypto, which I know nothing about, right? But confidence in the sense of like, hey, I might not know crypto yet, but I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to commit to doing the work and having some deliberate practice, i.e., what's shooting jump shots look like for an entrepreneur, right? Probably looks like thinking through that business model, or it looks like waking up every morning and prospecting, right? And sending out 10 warm emails. We don't do cold, right? But stuff like that. So think about where that overlap is from elite sports to entrepreneurship, and you get a lot of value. So check out the book, How Champions Think. If you read that, check out The Confident Mind by Dr. Nate Zinzer as well. Both great books, and I'll be writing some content on that as well. So as we close out here, Rosie, where can people find you? How can they support the work you're doing with Action Zone?
Well, we are actionzonetampa.com. We're located in Tampa. We're, as you mentioned earlier, an entrepreneur support organization serving the early stage and I'm not growing as fast as I want entrepreneur for military community members. At Bunker, I am the manager of the VIR. The applications, as Amy mentioned earlier, have just posted. We'll be taking applications for the Veterans and Residents program until the end of March. And then you'll be contacted for interviews or more additional information at that point. I encourage, even if you're in business and you're not growing the way you want to grow, you need to find the resources either in your community or around your region. Entrepreneurship is so big these days, right? 20 years ago, if I confessed to anybody that I was an entrepreneur, I had to hang my head in shame and confess it. Today, nearly every county in the country has some entrepreneurial resource. Find that. You don't have to do this by yourself. There are huge networks of people. Bunker all across the country has Bunker Connects. We've got communities that you can find on our website so that you can connect with other people. Being an entrepreneur can be lonely and it can be hard, but you don't have to do it alone because there's all kinds of us all over the country.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today, Rosie. As well as for those of you out there in the trenches, I want to make sure y'all check out the Transition Podcast, doing some great ecosystem mapping. I know we have some early stage startup founders that tune into the show. I have brought on Task Force Capital, right? I've had Veteran Venture Capital with Darren Burrell, right? So check those 2 interviews out. We've got a lot of other great content coming your way this month. So until next time, first, I got to acknowledge MetLife Foundation for even sponsoring the Transition Podcast. Without them, it wouldn't be possible. But until next time, everyone, peace, love, and have a great rest of your week.